one of the comments that we often hear people say is, well, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and try to do that. Try to reach down and try to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and see exactly what happens. It doesn't work. Again, that's the absence of a clear plan. Again, it's important for your audience to recognize that transitioning is a process. Leaving is a process. Just like joining the military is a process, exiting is a process. And that's where, again, there are a lot of gaps. There are a lot of challenges as a country. We haven't focused in on that component yet.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations. Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today we have our first panel style podcast, and we are going to be talking about the topic of purpose, specifically within the veteran community. And I have a couple of different guests on today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves here in a second, but I've known these guys for a couple months now and really doing some awesome work in the veteran community and have some really awesome research and information about purpose. And the reason that this topic came up is because it has been a hot topic in the veteran community, especially the younger veteran community. You see a lot of memes going around joking about purpose and how we separate from the military and then, loss of purpose and all those things kind of slap us in the face. And so I thought it would be really valuable to just do an episode about this, break down a lot of these things, and provide some solutions that can hopefully push you in the right direction if you're listening to this and you too feel like you've lost your sense of purpose. So I'm going to start with Rich. If Rich, you just want to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Sure. Dr. Rich Nicholson. I'm an organization psychologist. I've been involved with veteran transition and transformation for at least 15 years and working with Maurice and the Reboot team. I also have had a career in corporate America and organization development and leadership development. So I focus on organization design and personal transformation.
Awesome. And then Lee, I'll let you introduce yourself next.
You bet. My name is Lee Whittington. A little bit about myself. Was in the Air Force for 20 years, retired about 8-9 years ago. Had a second career at Boeing, just retired from Boeing. While I was at Boeing, found a passion to support veterans transitioning from active duty into our defense company and was the executive sponsor for the Boeing Veteran Affinity Group for a number of years and kind of realized my passion there. And so when I retired, I transitioned into my next chapter, kind of my next purpose after my civilian career was over, into helping veterans transition into civilian life. And so I joined Reboot, been supporting Maurice and Rich for the last 2.5 years.
Awesome. And then a lot of you listening have already met Maurice from the episode that we did together a few months back. If you have not listened to that one, make sure you go check it out. A lot of great information there. But if you have not, Maurice, I will let you introduce yourself on here for the new listeners.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Again, good to be here. I love the topic. Just to tell you or remind you a little bit about myself, Maurice Wilson, retired Navy, retired in 1998 after serving for 26 years. In 2009, I got bit by the bug to help veterans and then sought out Rich and Charlie to help build what we call a comprehensive reverse boot camp called Reboot. And we all jointly launched that in January 2010, did our first workshop in June of 2010, and haven't looked back since then. And so we specialize in military to civilian transitioning, changing the mindset from what we learned in the military to what we need to know as civilians. And so it is all about repurposing, finding your purpose. And as I mentioned in the last episode or the last podcast, when we come in, we basically are clean slate. And Uncle Sam writes the information onto our subconsciousness in terms of how things operate and what we need to do. And we basically get those three things. We get a mission, we get a purpose, and we got a career, and then we run off into the happy sunset until that moment comes or that time comes where we separate from the military. The vast majority, and the numbers are, in terms of the research, are pretty much straightforward. About 80 to 85% don't necessarily reinvent themselves or figure out what their next purpose is. And so spend a lifetime trying to figure it out. And as we'll get into the discussion, a lot of the research really points to purpose or loss of purpose as one of the primary issues and challenges facing veterans today, which is finding out what you want to do next, especially as you operate as an independent. You're outside of the military ecosystem. You no longer have that intrusive system telling you what to do, when to do. Everything is up to you. You have to write the plan of the day. And most of us are not prepared for that. So I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that segues us perfectly into the conversation. I think the question that I really had in my mind when I was transitioning out of the military was, now actually, let me back up a little bit. I didn't have this question as I was transitioning out of the military. It was probably a year after I transitioned out of the military. But how do you find your purpose when you don't even know what direction to start? And what I've realized lately is that the military creates such a black and white way of thinking. And a lot of people, when they're getting out of the military, it's okay, well, now I'm in the military and my next step is going to be this. And then somehow there's a misalignment there. And so I wanted to just talk about that. I mean, specifically starting out the conversation with people who are transitioning out, and they're really not having usually the conversation about what's your purpose. It's usually what are you going to do next? What's your next plan after the military? And so how does purpose fall into this? And anyone that wants to take this.
Well, let's let Rich go first and then I'll go after.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm sure, for me, we all have different perspectives, and I think multiple perspectives are good. But to me, the purpose comes from the inside out. And a lot of the conditioning from the military and other parts of life is outside in. So when you ask somebody, what is your purpose in life, you might get a blank stare. You usually do get that from almost anybody that's just walking down the street. So there's some ways to really help somebody identify what their purpose might be. And because it's very introspective, you have to be willing to hold up a mirror and look inward. So some of the things that we do within our Reboot workshop is, first thing, we take a baseline of where we are now, and you say, what's everything that's happening in your life? And your life is more than just your job or your identity. Your life it's really a holistic, puzzle of what you are. So we call it the life balance wheel. It's not only your job, but it's your family, it's your finances, it's your health and leisure, your spirituality, relationships, almost anything that you can think of that makes up your whole life. So I think it's really good if someone can sit down and sort of learn how to reflect on those types of things and kind of like baseline, where are they now in all of those things in their life? They may have never thought about that before. So it could really take some time, several cups of coffee, and really learn how to just be quiet and sort of listen to yourself. It's really great if you have a journal and you can start learning the power of journaling, because what you need to do is discover who you are, what your core values are, and then what is it that you're good at and passionate about, so that you can then kind of identify your purpose, or it might be called your calling. So that's a way to do it. And so you take stock of where you are now. And then I like to coach people to go back from birth to present time and sort of document the significant events in their life, positive and challenging events, so you can appreciate where you came from and where you are today. Because some of you want to take the good productive parts with you forward and leave some behind, but you don't want to have them buried unresolved in your trash can. So you want to deal with that. I say face it, process it, and leave it alone. Let it go. And then after you get that kind of like baseline and historical perspective, then you can start thinking about a future and getting a future vision. That can be done through a vision board, or through, really closing your eyes and thinking about, what does your perfect life look like, your perfect day, your perfect week, that sort of thing. Start drawing it out. And then as you're doing all of that, your purpose, or maybe some people call it your calling, can start emerging to the forefront. By doing this with a guide or a team of people doing the same thing, it can be very life-changing and powerful.
So, I would also, let me just stop. Lee, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I did have something just shortly. I think you're right, Rachel. There's some unique transition factors with service members as they leave the military where they're more challenged finding their new purpose in life than maybe civilians are when they go through another challenge or transition. And I think that largely is the product of the environment that they're coming from. As you mentioned, it's highly structured. There's also a lot of camaraderie and shared experiences. And so those things all combine, that camaraderie, the shared purpose, shared mission, all contribute to a very strong sense of purpose. And most military members associate their sense of purpose to that occupation, being in the military. So when they leave, all those things are gone. And it's so much more dramatic than just transitioning into a new career, let's say on the civilian side, because that camaraderie, that shared experience and shared purpose and mission is no longer there. And so it can be very disorienting to transition service members to get anchored and find a new purpose. And that's what, I think it's so much more difficult with these transitioning service members because they're used to having that structured environment and all those different elements that come with the military environment, which brings out that strong sense of mission and purpose. And then when they've left the military, they don't have that and they drift or they struggle. Maurice, over to you.
So to go back to your question, Rachel, where you asked, how do you find your purpose? So to your listeners, I can say unequivocally, with help. Okay, full stop, with help. Trying to do it by yourself is not impossible, but difficult, because again, it requires an external viewpoint of where you want to go. And so there's two ways to find your purpose. Either you could try to do it on your own through what we call the assimilation process. And Rich can talk about that, when a person assimilates. Now, some of the research that we found is that it can take up to 12 years to assimilate. Okay, because that's a series of mistakes, how they say you gotta learn not to do this, learn to do that, because you don't know what you don't know. So you're going to make mistakes, you're going to go back and forth, discover this and discover that, and it's going to be, for some people, painful. Some people never really recover from it. We've conducted reboot workshops with homeless individuals, individuals who have been Vietnam era veterans, across the board. And we've seen individuals sort of like locked in what we call a time warp, where they got out, but they're still thinking that military mindset. And so that mindset is that the programming is still there. So again, how do you find your purpose? Well, there's two ways to do it. One way is by assimilation, and we could talk a lot about that. Or the other way, which is through what we've done, which is the Reboot workshop, which we've been able to get the process down to 3 weeks in a very successful way. And we're now refining the process even more by kind of taking the full curriculum and distributing it over a time frame, because now we're trying to get along with technology, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So Rich, I'll throw the ball over to you on that.
Sure. And in very practical terms, one of the first questions you can ask yourself is, my purpose in life is ... And you ask people to think about that and answer the question. We often put that up if we go to events or fairs and things like that. And it's just amazing when people walk by and read that and they pause and they look at it, whether they're a veteran or not a veteran. My purpose in life is, and you ask them to do that. And so many times someone will just say what their job is, or they'll just say it's my family. And then the second question can be, well, how do you demonstrate that? What does that look like? And for many people, this is the first time they've ever thought about that.
So talking about the research, I want to get a little bit more into that, because there are some really awesome research articles and just articles in general that you had sent over my way talking more about this. And I don't think this is a topic that really is talked about much from a research backed standpoint. And there is, in fact, tons of research about this. And I think it is something that needs to be talked about more. So if you wouldn't mind, Rich, just delving a little bit more into some of the stuff that you had sent my way as far as research on this topic.
Sure. And some of the research that is coming out and has been for the last several years is really identified things like purpose as being a driver for health and well-being, to the point where there's some research coming out that says the key driver for emotional and physical distress up to suicide is actually not combat PTSD. It's actually a lack of purpose. Lack of purpose and identity can be added to that. So yes, the PTSD and those sorts of things are very serious, need to be looked at, but it's that lack of purpose. I call it purpose and a renewed identity is something that if it's not in place could begin the downward spiral to all kinds of problems, including family problems, relationship, job problems, substance abuse, and so on and so forth. So there is research showing the impact of having a purpose, having a new identity, and so on and so forth. Guys, have anything else to add to that?
No, I totally agree. In fact, we search and look at all the data and the research, numerous articles that not only talk about purpose being a challenge, it also really dives, a lot of the research really dives into the whole issue around jobs. And so it's sort of like, when you look at your purpose, well, it comes with a package that says, okay, so what do you really have to do? Well, when you join the military, you have to understand what happens to you coming in so that you could reverse trend what happened. And so fundamentally, again, I always like to, punt back to Rich, but three major things happen. A, we get a new identity, which that in itself is major. B, we get a purpose in life, something that we didn't have before coming in the military. And oh, by the way, when we leave the military, we lose that mission or we lose that purpose and it has to be replaced. And then the third thing is a career. And so 1, 2, 3, we get an identity, we get a purpose, and we get a career. So when we leave the military, those have to be replaced. But all in all, for the vast majority of individuals, when they leave the military, they haven't replaced the identity. They still have a military mindset. They haven't found their purpose in life because the mission was what the military's mission was. And 85 to 86% want a complete career change and they don't want to do what they did in the military. So imagine that void, in that deficit of purpose and substance being lost in an instance and not being able to find it. Rich, back over to you.
Sure.
Yeah, I have something to add real quick, Rachel. So your question on research, there's studies recently that talk about the importance of purpose on longevity and health and just the population in general. And then there's research that talk about the specific issues with veterans, especially transitioning service members, because of the environment that they're coming from in the military. But on the macro view, there's a really good study out by Boston University in 2022 that talks about how, and they studied over, I think, 10 to 15,000 people over a period of time. And he found out that having a purpose-driven life reduced all-cause mortality by 20% overall in men and 34% with women. So a couple of interesting facts there. The large reduction in all-cause mortality if you have a purpose-driven life, but also even differences between men and women there. And then if you neck it down into the specific challenges with veterans, because of the environment that they're coming from that we talked about earlier, there's more recent studies. One that we used heavily here in Southern California, where USC has done a study of over 3,000 veterans in Southern California, and they broke out the demographics in three different stratifications. And one was recently transitioned service members within 5 years. And what they saw is nearly 60% of those recently transitioned veterans agreed with the statement that after I left the military, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. They've lost their identity because they've lost their purpose.
Uh-huh.
And then because of that loss of mission and purpose, and then the loss of identity, they become more isolated and lonely. And that's where really stark evidence shows from the same study that nearly 60% of these recently transitioned veterans suffer from loneliness and isolation. So it is, like I said, a very stark issue with transitioning service members. But the importance, as we've talked about, of having a purpose to your health, to your well-being, it helps you be much more resilient to stress as well. These are all evidence-based findings from various studies. But then again, the studies confirm that transitioning service members have an especially difficult time reestablishing their purpose coming out of the military.
Mhm.
And it all ties together sort of in a domino effect when the lack of socialization, which results in feelings of isolation and loneliness, are also a result of not having a purpose and identity. If
That's
you
right.
can tie in, if you can identify purpose and identify, you can identify your new friend group within the community that you can connect with. They're like-minded individuals, and you can start surrounding yourself with people that are going to encourage you and going to be there and going to go through the the transition journey with you. So there's a lot of emotional and physical reorientation that has to take place, because in the military you always had your next mission. It was waiting for you. You also had a group around you to get you back on track if you went off the rails a little bit, your peers and your leadership. So you're really conditioned to follow through on things. When you get out without that sort of reorientation type of training and the new habits, you can just get blindsided and just smacked with reality that, hey, I'm on my own and I'm not even sure how to navigate that at all. I've never done that before.
Yeah, and
And
that's
Rachel, I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, go
I,
go ahead. Finish your
I,
thought.
I was going to say, and what we have all too often are a lot of veterans, young and old, getting out believing that they can do it on their own. And it's really it's hard to change from the inside out unless somebody shows you how. And so that's one of the missing things. There are so many constructs going on where the individual doesn't even see the problem, even though the problem is in existence. And so, again, sometimes we just, in our rush to get out and start a new life and, ready to move on. And, one of the things that we talked about is being impatient and wanting results now, where it's prudent to just take a step back and just recognize that, hey, I don't know what I don't know. And I've been out of the loop for many, many years. So I really don't know what's going on out here. So let me, just like anything else, let me take a course in becoming a civilian as opposed to just stepping into it without knowing what's going on.
Yeah, and that's just the thing, is most people that are getting out of the military are taking advice from that chief or senior chief that's never actually been out of the military. They've just been in for 20, 30 years and they're giving the best advice they can. But someone once told me a few years back, don't take advice from someone who's never been where you want to be. And so, it's really tough to learn things from someone who's just reading instructions and doing the best they can, but they really don't know what it's like to
Well,
go through that.
well, there's also that culture in the military where we've all looked up to the chief. Hey, he knows everything, and so he's going to tell me the straight skinny.
Yep.
Well, not to say anything about my brothers, but if you
Yeah.
haven't been there, it's hard for you to really know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some poor advice that a lot of people, good intended people, will say, just get a job
Yeah.
and then figure it out, work it out as you get a job. Well, that's kind of like fixing a plane while you're flying it to some
Hmm.
extent,
Which
because
they do.
that's right, exactly. Because if you just take a job to get a job and just start trying to pay your bills without having redefined your identity and your purpose, the turnover rate is very high in the first 1 to 2 years. And also the your self-satisfaction is low, and it continues to drop, and that's not good for your emotional well-being. So we really believe that you need to step back and immediately start redefining yourself and your
Yeah.
future.
Yeah.
I
And
would say, we're talking about
go-
next steps and solutions to help veterans and specifically transitioning service members find a new purpose, just to weather the storm, because there is going to be a transitional uh, turbulence, I'll say, as you transition in civilian life. And one of the things that is encouraging, we've seen some move afoot by the DoD to improve their transitional assistance programs on base for transitioning service members. I think they can go a lot further by actually helping them bring in people that will prepare the transitioning service members with emotional preparedness to help them focus on being prepared emotionally for the transition experiences, such as a potential loss of purpose, identity, and their community that they're leaving from the military. So I think that's something that certainly can be done better, is prepare the transitioning service members in the area of emotional preparedness. And I think the community also has a really important aspect to help that transitioning service member help find a purpose and find belonging that they won't have anymore since they've left the military. they can become more active in creating a more inclusive, supportive environment to welcome veterans transitioning from the service into their community. So I think a community reintegration aspect also can help with, helping that transitioning service member find their new purpose.
And Rich, I just wanted to add one other thing. Rich kind of tripped a thought of mine. One of the comments that we often hear people say is, "Well, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps," and try to do that. Try to reach down and try to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and see exactly what happens. It doesn't work. Again, that's the absence of a clear plan. Again, it's important for your audience to recognize that transitioning is a process. Leaving is a process. Just like joining the military is a process, exiting is a process. And that's where, again, there are a lot of gaps. There are a lot of challenges as a country. We haven't focused in on that component yet, which I'm sure that's something we're going to talk about next.
It's a process. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity not to say, I'm going to try to get by after the military and I'm going to see what I can do to get by. This is an opportunity to rebuild your life better than you ever imagined it to be. And everything that you've learned in the military and now the new freedoms that you have and the ability to create your future and to get around with other people that are doing it. It's really an unbelievable opportunity that not many people have at this point in their life. So you can actually redefine, re-engineer, and recreate your life to be whatever it is you can imagine that you want to be. And that's where
And
we
that's
try to
that's a
take
continuous
people.
process. It's not a point destination. And so it's a journey of continuing self-discovery as you transition through different phases of your life. And, we all have been there. It's a major transition from active duty to civilian life. I went through another pretty difficult transition when I retired from my Boeing job after 23 years. And so as a baby boomer, I had identified my career as my primary purpose in life. It's one of the faults of the baby boomers, I think, right or wrong. A very common attribute with that generation, associating your career as your purpose. And so when that career was gone, I struggled to find a new purpose. And so again, that was a different kind of transition when I left active duty to get into civilian life, but it is a continuing process and really a journey of self-reflection and self-discovery.
Yeah, other research shows that veterans are more successful as entrepreneurs than non-veterans, if you can believe it.
Really?
So if you've been seeing the military thinking, wow, I'd love to own my own business, I'd love to really get out and give it a shot. We help, again, don't do it alone. We help people identify what it is they'd like to do, how you can ease into it, because that's a fact. They make better entrepreneurs, so on and so forth. So, when Lee's saying it is a lifetime thing, it's a change in your mindset. And it's something where we have the visioning exercises and so forth, where if you set your mind on something in a very, very clear picture, your subconscious and your physical body will start moving towards solving that issue and taking you in that direction. So this is a time where we don't want anyone to put any restrictions on themselves at all. We want to say, this is where you take all the barriers down, take everything away, find out who you are, and create the brightest future you could ever imagine.
I'm so glad we keep talking about this mindset piece of it, because I did a whole talk for Memorial Day about how loneliness isn't just about surrounding yourself with more people. And I think the same can be said for, all these other aspects of purpose in transition and reintegration. Is it's not just about get yourself the job and make sure that you're checking the boxes, which is that very militaristic black and white mindset of, okay, well, today I'm here, and then I'm here, and then I'm here, and then somehow along the way, happiness will find me. Because it really is about changing the mindset. And that's not really something that's being taught to service members.
Yeah, a lot of times we say there's a lot of people, we say they're sitting on their dock in quiet desperation, waiting for their ship to come in, but they've never sent their ship out. And so they're going to be waiting for a long time. So it's really about, reconstructing that mindset, re-engineering it from the locus of control, or where the learning came from, was external from the military. You have to shift it to an internal locus of control where you are now going to be determining your future. And everybody is born with natural abilities and gifts and talents that they do better than other people. They were born with it. It's not something you have to go and learn and so forth. You can hone it, but everybody has at least 2 or 3 things that they do excellently. They may have not been able to discover that in the military because the job may have been given to them. So you may have to step back. Again, it's hard for some people to do this, thinking that they actually have the freedom and the own power that they can actually identify what it is that they want to do.
Well said.
Well, Lee and I talked a little bit before we started recording about the service organizations. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because, Lee, there's something that you'd said about purpose with the service organizations. And we had a whole conversation about how a lot of the service organizations just aren't welcoming environments to the younger veteran generation. And so I kind of wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about that. And so the reason that this thought was triggered in my head is, I believe it was you, Rich, who had said, or one of you, I can't remember, had said something about surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And so a lot of people think, okay, like-minded people, I'm going to go hang out at the VFW or the Legion. And a huge issue that I have with the veteran service organizations is not feeling like they're welcoming environments for me. And I don't say that in a malicious way. I say that in a way of, how do we fix this problem so that they do feel like more welcoming environments. But I just kind of wanted to open up that topic for discussion, and wherever it goes is wherever it goes.
Well, I think you're hitting on something that's really important, because I think oftentimes we're seeing that the leadership of these service organizations, they are setting up that service organization and supporting the organization with different activities that they relate to, but it may not be inclusive of a different demographic. And some of the service organizations that you mentioned, you have some pretty senior leadership in place, and their model of connecting are people of their same demographic. But when it comes to attracting, let's just say, younger veterans, post 9/11 and recently transitioned service members, it doesn't connect with that demographic. And so the service organizations, I think, have to make sure that their leadership is diverse enough to be inclusive of the different demographics, so that they can appeal and be inviting to the different demographics, be it senior veterans or ones that are just leaving the service, because that's oftentimes what we see. It's not all that inclusive. They think they may be, but again, they're just surrounding themselves with like-minded people, like-minded, very similar demographic. And many of the veterans leaving the service, it won't appeal to them. And what we're seeing is, some of these transitioning service members, they have different interests than typically the activities that you see at your Legion post or the VFW. And so I think, we need to learn more from research organizations about, and listen to those younger veterans, what are they interested in? One thing that, a hypothesis that we have, we may end up teaming up with USC on some of this, is that some of the younger veterans are interested more in entrepreneurship. Rich talked a little bit about that, maybe community service focus, maybe health and wellness and fitness, like Team Red, White, and Blue or Travis Manion. You see typically the younger veteran demographic in some of those service organizations. So I think we just have to be mindful, those that leave or lead service organizations, to be inclusive and make sure that we're representative of the different demographics of veterans in the service organizations.
Some of the focus groups we've done with some of these groups, have shown us that veterans that have families, growing families, what they're not interested in, like a social club drinking environment that's just the service members. They're interested in things that are going to enrich their family as well as themselves. So when you think of a VFW or American Legion, which may have been a social gathering place with kind of like a bar situation, they would love to see a coffee shop with Wi-Fi. They'd love to see seminars for career development and personal development, yoga classes. We found one that has yoga classes, I think, in Colorado. Resources for their family, childcare resources, events for the family. So more inclusive, that includes their family, and where they can actually make it part of their lifestyle, their growing, developing lifestyle is what really seems to be neat. So the average age of American Legion VFW, most of them is more elderly, senior citizen type of thing. Okay, so the question is, with their membership dwindling, are they going to be able to reimagine themselves and reinvent themselves so they can include the younger generations of families? Or is it going to be an evolution, or is it going to be an attachment, or is it something that has to come completely from somewhere else?
So, Rachel, that was another really good question. And so let me try to answer it, as being as political as possible, without impugning anyone else in any way, shape, or form. First and foremost, you're familiar with the term the sea of goodwill. And again, I think for your audience, it's important for them to know the history behind that, even where that term came from. And that term was created by back in around about 2011, 12, and it came to fruition around about 2015 by retired Admiral Mike Mullins. And at the time, he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs Military Veterans and Family Reintegration. And one of the things that he looked at was this ocean of organizations. At the time, it was like 45,000 organizations. I mean, everybody was rushing to help veterans. The news popped somewhere around about 2009, and then everybody started rushing in the game. By 2015, everybody and their uncle was in the game wanting to help. So what do you do when you have and now the number is up to 65,000 is the number currently, if you will. And so what do you do when you have so many well-meaning, well-intending people rush to the battlefront to help veterans and their families? The news popped and the stories broke, and suicide and PTSD and wounded warriors and injuries, and oh my goodness. And I don't know if you guys remember the Wounded Warrior commercials, that was really just heartbreaking. I mean, you got everybody involved. So everybody rushed to the aid of veterans. Here's the problem. Most people rush to the aid of veterans. And let me go back to Mike Mullins. And one of the strong comments that he said was, the only way that we're going to be able to successfully reintegrate veterans and their families is when everybody comes together and works as a unit. And what he was saying was, we got too many people out there all doing different things. Basically, we have 45,000 silos of individuals and organizations, that so for the veteran and the transition service member, you have to transverse all these organizations to find what you want. And the range was from like mom and pop, 1 and 2 people, all the way up to mega organizations. And so there were really no in-processing, there was no strategies, no coordination, and everybody was focused on what they thought was their best gift that they could give. And again, no intention to impugn anyone's intent and support for veterans. But again, what we've learned over the years, and this is where we are now, we've learned that the only way that it's going to be done is through coordination and integration and everybody working together as a team. And we believe in that old African proverb where it says it takes a village. And so that's in America today. That's the problem, is that we have too many organizations, not enough integration and coordination. Everybody's got a different idea of what they want to do. Everybody utilizes resources differently. Everybody has a different capacity. Funding goes up and down. It's a cat and mouse kind of game. And what that's doing is that's actually creating more chaos for transition service members. And if you look at the VA study that was done in 2015, it was released in 2018, among all of the issues that veterans complain about, 60% of the issues were related to navigation of program services, et cetera. They just didn't know where to go. So it kind of goes back to what we talked about in purpose. So if you leave and you don't know what your purpose is and how to get it, where do you go to get purpose? It's kind of like back to that question. So what organization do you go to? Not necessarily for emergency services. Yes, you do go for emergency services, but what happens beyond the emergency? How do you deal with that before the emergency? And where do you go to find your purpose? Because again, you're leaving a purpose-driven organization, and now you're kind of embarking upon a purpose-driven life. So again, the whole sea of goodwill, where there are a lot of well-meaning people, The problem is that they're not working together. So the advice that I would give to an individual is I would ask them, who are you working with? Who, not just who you're working with, who are you integrating with and collaborating with? What's the organizational team? And that will tell you everything that you need to know, about what's going on right there. If somebody says, well, we just do it by ourselves, then okay, enter at your, now it becomes a risk reward kind of thing. Then you really have to gauge whether or not you're going to get everything that you need. And again, what we found is that veterans don't just need one thing. They need a whole lot of things. But again, once you've exhausted the resources of that organization, then you have to find the next one and find the next one. It gets frustrating. Rich, you want to add anything to that?
I just want to say, along with that, with the economic conditions, inflation and so forth, and even in the very expensive cities to live in where a lot of veterans congregate, that food, shelter, and clothing are coming up as very, very top needs. So who would have thought that food scarcity would be one of the top needs of a veteran, or housing, right? And that sort of thing. So these are things that, yes, now we're talking about the basic survival needs from like Herzog's pyramid that have to be addressed. And if you're struggling with that, it's really going to be hard to renew that purpose and identity. So when Maurice said you have to have like a team working together, almost like a team of doctors for something like that, it's so true. And ideally, you'll start thinking about this before you exit the military, up to 1 or even 2 years before your exit. If you are thinking about that while you're in a comfort zone in the military and identifying, your purpose, your identity, getting your ducks in a row for housing and things like that, then you're going to have a much smoother transition when you exit.
Yeah, you should have your team before you get out. You should have your team in place.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head, Maurice, when you're talking about organizations and people reaching out for help to more than one organization. A lot of veterans don't like to ask for help and don't like to ask for help until they're in an emergency or crisis mode. And I think a lot of us forget that there are organizations that are out there to help before crisis mode and hopefully prevent crisis mode altogether. And there are tons of organizations out there that are designed specifically for that purpose. And so hopefully that provokes some thought in the listeners that are maybe in a place where life might seem good right now, or maybe life is in a neutral space right now. And, looking out to some of these organizations that might help with finding purpose or some kind of equilibrium. And so I wanted to spend the last little part of our episode today talking about resources, because I know there's someone that's going to be listening to this that is in a space where maybe they separated from the military a year ago, 2-3 years ago, and they're one of those people that's kind of joking about like, oh, I got out of the military and then I lost my sense of purpose. So I guess my question would be, what would be your recommendations from all three of you for next steps for that specific individual on what to do? And this can obviously, it's going to vary based on location, but just in general, what would you recommend for someone that's in that space?
Well, yeah, I'll just jump in and say, join us. Attend the weekly muster, sign up for what we have. The lesson that we've learned, having done this now going on 14, 15 years, is learn how to do it right. What does it take? What's the process? What are the components? Who are the teams and all of that? And so we're working hard to make it easy for transitioning service members. And all you have to really do is just join in. It's really that easy. We do online virtual reboot seminars. We have weekly musters. Pretty much we found a way to make these things work. And when we host a live seminar, and if it's in your area that's near you, come down and participate. Our workshops, everything that we do is always free. So nobody's going to ask you for any money. Our goal is to close the gaps. But also what we want to do is make you an advocate as well, get you involved in the game, because not only are you a veteran needing help, you're a resource that could help other veterans. And so that would be the upfront thing that I would share. Lee, Rich, what else do you want to share on that one?
I agree, Maurice. The easiest thing to do is call into our weekly call-in. It's called the weekly muster. We've been doing it for several years. It's every Saturday from 11 to 12 Pacific time. Maurice has the website link. It's
weeklymuster.online. That's it.
Weeklymuster.online from 11 to 12. You'll get in, you'll be on a call just like this with other people that have good intentions and they're like-minded in positive ways. And we do a wellness check-in, see if you need any help or any networking or any advice. And then we do a learning topic. Lee?
Yeah, the one additional thought is, along with taking advantage of the Muster and Reboot workshops, I'm a huge believer in connecting with a one-on-one coach, be it a life coach, career coach. We have Reboot is linked up with Onward Ops so that we're providing coaching services one-on-one with transitioning service members. And those of us that have coached some of those service members, I think they would say, in fact, the feedback indicates it's made a big difference in their transition experience. And we can guide them through exercises using Reboot workshops and exercises from that workshop to help them define their new purpose, which boils down to things that we just talked about: identifying what you like to do, your passions, your interests, identifying what you're good at, your strengths and skills, and then identifying what kind of impact you want to make. And where those things intersect, that's the sweet spot. That's your purpose.
We do that through conversations. We do it through coaching. We do that on the weekly muster, and it's really effective. We have a lot of success stories.
Yeah, but do start. That's the whole piece right there, which is start. Don't wait. Don't sit around wondering and trying to figure it out. Start now, because again, the clock is ticking. Right. The longer you're out there, the longer you wait, the more things fall behind. We just basically tell them the time to act is now.
Right. Absolutely. Maurice, did you want to talk about the job search resources?
So on the job search resources, so we're taking a totally different, I guess you could call it, strategy from everybody else, which is our goal is to make things easy. So here's the deal. What the research says basically is 86% of you want to change to a completely different career. You just don't know what it is. That's just a point of fact right now. So, but also many may not have the skills to do all these other things. Plus, finding a job is a task in itself, sifting through millions of jobs, and then writing a resume is a burdensome task. And again, depending upon whether or not your mind is made up, I know some people who have applied for like 200 jobs, and they were wondering why they're not getting any callbacks from employers. And to me, it's like, we call it a scotoma, which is something that's hidden in front of your face. The problem is clear. You're going to write 200, you're going to send out 200 resumes of your baseline resume, okay? Your baseline resume is what you did while you were in the military. But the job that you're applying for is something else. So it's just not matching up. And so what we're launching, and again, we're still, I don't want to say in the developmental phase, we're getting ready to launch real soon, is an artificial intelligence app called JobSet.ai. JobSet.ai. And what it does is revolutionizing the whole job search industry, just like, I don't know if you guys tracked the news last week where ChatGPT 4.0 came out. The whole landscape in the AI realm just went in a whole nother direction last week. It's storming. One of the folks out there called it a tsunami. They said in terms of the job-changing tsunami, it's about to change. And then what's his name? Mr. Kai-Fu Lee. Kai-Fu Lee just basically said, look, the jobs as you know it, going to see a 50% change, the whole landscape, by 2027. Yeah. 50% change by 2027. That's less than 3 years away.
Yeah.
And so again, the whole change says that you got to get in the game. You got to start changing. And so what we're offering is first to help you find yourself, and then utilizing this new technology app that we have will help you find the career. Because remember, there's 3 things you got to do. You got to create a new identity. You got to find your purpose, and then you got to find your career fit. Notice those 3 triangles right there. Is like, okay, who knows how to do all that? And have the support to do that. And so again, with us, we find that's what we do, is help find the solutions to some of the challenges that are facing veterans. And we believe that the whole AI job matching app is the way to go. You don't have to write a resume. It writes a resume for you. You don't have to find the jobs. It finds the jobs for you. Wow. It just makes sense. And then at that particular point, it's just basically deciding, here's where now it gets into sort of like this, what we call self-efficacy based decision of, What will you be doing that will make you happy? Because again, it's got to be part of your purpose that says, okay, I got to be happy. And obviously, everything that we just said here is a lot to think about. And that's why most people don't do it, because it's so much to think about. It's overwhelming. And Rich will tell you that, the one thing about your mind, your brain, your mind is always trying to find the easy way out. It doesn't like to be overloaded and stressed. The more it's overloaded and stressed, the more it's kind of like it's more prone to failure if it's overloaded. And so our goal is to create a situation and an environment and provide tools and assistance and technology to take that load and that stress off your mind so you can make the right decision at the right time.
Any other thoughts anyone else had that's a burning thing on your mind that you wanted to share on this topic of purpose that you think might serve the listeners well?
I'd like to say that your best life is yours for the taking, and no one is going to give it to you. You can discover aspects of it, you can create aspects of it, but if you want a life of purpose, meaning, and happiness, it's within reach. And there is it's a finite set of, if you want to call them exercises or thought processes or shifts in your mindset to identify that purpose and then that vision, and then developing a massive action plan to move towards it with a support system. We have so many people say, I wish took me 15 years to kind of like get on track. And if I was with you guys at the beginning, I probably could have done it in a year. And it's right. You can go, it's like you can leave LA and go to New York without a map. And where are you going to go? You can just be turning all over the place, or you could go with a map or with your GPS cued in, and you can have more of a direct line to your future that's in alignment with who you are and who you're meant to be. So you're only going to do it if you get started. So get started now, and then just enjoy that journey.
And the only thing I would add, Rachel, lastly, is to get started, don't let your pride get in the way. We know that veterans and transition service members are prideful individuals. And what we also see is that in the sea of goodwill, the fact that oftentimes the veterans aren't connecting with them is not just that they don't know where to start. Sometimes their pride gets in the way and they won't ask for help. It's just, again, a little bit of a stereotype, but I think that we've seen that a lot of it is very much true. And if you can get past the pride factor, because there are resources out there, many of which we just identified, that can help you with your new purpose and identity after the military, then you're going to see the benefits of that. So you got to start with a step, and getting past pride to ask for help is one of the biggest challenges I think that veterans have.
Yeah. And Rachel, I would say finally, it's the process. You got to understand the process. And as we often tell individuals who join in with us, we tell them it is a process, and then we tell them trust the process. Don't fight it. Don't second guess it. Just trust the process. And everyone who has done it is doing really well.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to include every single one of those resources that we talked about in this episode today in the show notes. Weekly muster, that link, as well as the website where you can sign up for the Reboot seminars. They're usually in person in Southern California.
They're virtual too.
Right. Where do you normally have them in person? Is it San Diego on the Midway, or is it in various places?
It's in various places. So we do it on the Midway. We do it at different, what we call centers for military and veteran reintegration out in town. We just move it around, if you will.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to post that link. So if you are a transitioning service member, if you've gotten out of the military already and you are looking for your purpose, your sense of direction, your community, please take advantage of these resources. And if you want to connect with Rich, Lee, or Maurice, you can connect with them on these weekly muster calls as well, and just really start building that sense of purpose that you have been craving for so long, if that's the position that you're in. And even if you feel like you found your purpose already, connecting with other like-minded veterans in the community is so important, because again, you become that resource. And I love that was used as an example of you're not only benefiting yourself, but you now are benefiting every other veteran that you talk to for the rest of your life, because now you become a resource. And the more people can become resources, the more we spread this throughout the veteran community. And that is how people find the help they need. And that is how we incite change across the veteran community. So Lee, Rich, and Maurice, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share some insights on this very important topic. I hope that the listeners reach out, that they join the weekly musters, that they take advantage of the resources and spread the message across the veteran community.
Awesome.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today, with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.